We're going to start that one again. This is why you should never go live. All right. So everyone watching on Instagram, you're all happy as Larry. For the podcast, this is when we start now. Right there. I just realised that one in the corner.
I'm pretty good, mate. Things have been going well.
Wait, I need to do an introduction here.
Oh, fucking hell, right, come on.
Strength Chat, episode 87. I've been looking forward to this since we first set it up.
I'm out.
Strength Chat, episode 87. Welcome to the Powerlifting Roundtable. Been really looking forward to this. Today I'm joined by three coaches who not only compete themselves, but have coached complete beginners all the way up to national and even international level. Today I am joined by Tim Garrett, Dan Bedford, Chris Kershaw.
You forgot my second name then, didn't you?
It's the awkwardness of being live, you see. Yes, so anyone listening on the podcast, I had to do that again because I messed it up. How are you all doing? What's been going on?
Well, I'm pretty good. Just been working away with clients at various levels. Got a few new beginners starting this month, so it's pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah, more of the same really. Working out of MP Fit in Brighouse. Everything's going really well there. Competing at the Commonwealth in about 4 or 5 weeks' time.
Nice.
Got back from IPF World a few months back where I had a couple of lifters lifting. But yeah, more of the same really. Competition's coming up at the end of this year and just busy.
Nice. Tim?
Things going pretty well at the minute. In terms of competing and stuff, I've taken a departure from powerlifting for a little bit while I dropped some weight and healed some injuries, and focusing more on taekwondo at the minute. It's good, come back to doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And finding that fun. In terms of coaching stuff, I am still only coaching online. Things going well with that, with competitions at the minute. Starting to branch out a little bit more with that, with people having slightly different goals from just pure competing. Currently getting somebody ready to do his police training.
That's nice.
Get through stuff like that, so I'm to learn more about cardio and conditioning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just general nutrition stuff as well. So,
have you been putting more cardio into your own training as well?
through taekwondo, yeah. Specifically, just like cardiac output and threshold training.
I will put in there and say watching Tim on a self-powered treadmill is it's quite a sight.
That is a thing of beauty.
I'm not off it yet.
How close are you?
I like the key word there, yet.
Yeah.
You are expecting to.
It's been in the gym a week, I think. Like 2 people fall after. It's been months now, so. Really fun.
Yeah.
Got terrified of it. It's like sprint on the
makes
spot,
it
on like an action. That's what it feels like.
You're going to have to go on one of those.
Yeah, quite
So that's a little bit of what they've been up to. I've seen these guys take quite a lot of lifters to quite a lot of competitions since I've been involved in powerlifting for the past 3 or 4 years. But for anyone listening or watching who might not know your backgrounds, obviously you've all got a little bit of different backgrounds, but obviously all got into coaching and obviously competed yourselves. Just want to give a little bit of a background to yourselves.
Yeah, shall I start with this one? Yeah. So I've been a PT for, my God, it's been 10 years. 10
years!
It's been so cruel to me, you know. It's been a really hard paper round. I started off as a bodybuilder. When I first started as a PT, I didn't even know what powerlifting was. I think it was about 1/8 as popular as it is now. I started training bodybuilders, competed in that in 2013, and I did okay. In my first competition, I won that one and then went to a British. And then, long story short, gave myself an eating disorder with that, and then I needed something to help me control my weight and get over that, so I started with powerlifting from there. And therefore just started to help people with powerlifting in the gym, and then became strength coach from there, and just working with clients through that through various levels. Yeah, that's me today.
Yeah, so my background's slightly different. I always played rugby before powerlifting. I played professional from being about 16 years old. That took me through various clubs. Went on to play student rugby at international level, where I eventually ended up retiring myself, playing against Fiji. And from there, I kind of then got into strength sport. Initially did a little bit of strongman, which I'll never ever do again. And then that led me into powerlifting. Following that, upon completion of my masters, I did quite a bit of strength and conditioning work over the back of that. And then, yeah, since then I've competed internationally, all sorts of regional records and stuff of that sort. And obviously then coaching. Powerlifting specific, I've been coaching about 4 years now, PTing just over 2 years full time, and everything's going really well. It's all building from there. Nice. Few international athletes under my belt, and yeah, it's all going really well.
Good.
Well, so my strength training journey kind of started as a result of getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think through a reverse of what majority of powerlifters do now, they get broken and then go to Jiu-Jitsu. I went to Jiu-Jitsu and I fucking get on. I got into powerlifting because I was a lot better at lifting weights than doing Jiu-Jitsu. And then I bumped into a powerlifter at the gym. So I was just generally pushing starting strength, 3x5. Didn't really know anything about powerlifting. I was just squatting and benching and deadlifting. And I met Kit. And he told me to come along to a competition to watch it and just getting into it. So I got interested in it through that, my first competition in 2013. And then I kind of just fell into coaching by accident. A group of people I was training with, including Dan. I think I was pretty much the only person that knew how to use Excel.
Yeah.
And I programmed and had the time and wherewithal to be looking at programming principles and just learning stuff. So eventually people just, because I wouldn't shut up about it, people started listening. And it went on casually through that. 2015 was just going to the British bench record, the junior and then just coaching my friends. And then I got to a point where a few people said, look, if you want people to listen to you properly and you want them to actually do what you tell them to do, you need to start charging them. So I did. Yeah. And that's what graph came from. Yeah, really.
Awesome. Nice. So as you can see there's sort of a varied background, if you like, but all with the same goal of obviously getting involved in powerlifting and ultimately coaching people and getting people stronger, getting people competing, and getting them progressing, from complete beginners progressing through. So over the last sort of week or so, we've been sharing and posting and asking questions that you guys would want answering, and also we had a couple of ideas of what we wanted to talk about. So I've kind of tried to put them in a little bit of an order. There may be a few tangents thrown in there, but obviously, with the experience that these guys have of hands-on coaching and the stuff that they've learned and their experience, apart from Chris, we're just gonna go through, and I don't think we can see any of your questions. If you get any questions, we might try and answer them. But the first one, obviously, sort of bread and butter, if you like, taking beginner lifters and that transition period over into intermediate lifters. So the first question is, as coaches, what are the most common common errors that you see when novice or intermediates are training or going into competitions? What are the common errors that you see and where people go wrong?
The real shit.
Yeah, I'd agree with him there. I think it is a point I've made, I've got listed down here. It can kind of go two ways, beginners and intermediates. They can either go down the road, usually of being absolutely obsessed with technique, which is not necessarily a bad thing from the get-go, or they can go down the road of just lifting stuff that's way too heavy for them, getting injured several times, and then getting into a vicious circle of that. Ideally, we want them to get somewhere in the middle and learn to kind of push the boat out a little bit, but also learn to lift it well. Yeah. So it is quite a common thing I see, lifters turning up with dog shit technique, monging weights up, and they'll get so far, but if they're ever going to get to advanced level, they're probably at least going to get injured once first, and they'll have to learn at some point, to reel it in. So yeah, I do agree. The way they move is a big factor.
Yeah, it was about saying you just hit a wall because it gets to a certain point where there's only so much weight you can go lining up. Yeah, yeah. There's only so much weight you can deadlift up to your knees, and then you have to uncurl the rest of your body.
Absolutely. And for me, a mistake, well, not necessarily a mistake, but something that a beginner lifter might not have is having a ritual for all three of the lifts. So every time that they approach a bar, they're going to approach it slightly differently rather than gradually honing something that, exactly. So that consistency of setup. So they'll change it every single time that they lift. And I think that goes into another mistake that people will make, in that they try and change too much at once. Yeah. So they might try and change the bar position, the hand position, the feet position, all at the same time, rather than having a methodical approach to it, changing one thing at a time, maybe for a couple of weeks, and then changing something else to see how that influences all three of the lifts from there. So knowing as and when to change things, I think, is something that we'll learn along the way.
As a first question on that, probably people listening, and a standard sort of joke is that powerlifters don't have very good movement, because it is only squat, bench and deadlift. It's the same plane of movement. But actually, I think looking at it and not having good movement is yes, it's an amateur sport, but how, especially when you look at sort of the top level as well, people will work a little bit more on mobility. I mean, competing at the Commonwealth as well, how much do you spend days on your mobility and recovery and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so it's at a point now, which is something I never used to do, where I literally spend a period of every day doing some mobility, some static stretching, and general just movement.
Yeah.
I'll take myself on a walk pretty much every day now for 25-30 minutes, and I'll spend a good 15-20 minutes on mobility every day, regardless of whether I'm training or not. That's something I never used to do when I started out. I do a little bit of a dynamic warm-up, a little bit of a bar warm-up, get on the bar go. And to be honest, I was fine doing that for probably about 2 years. But as you start to get stronger, your body doesn't quite bounce back the same, and movement becomes a bit more of a priority. So I dare say the majority, I'm not going to say all of us, but the guys, once you get to a higher level, are paying a lot more attention to that now.
Yeah. I think it's an old school mentality, if you like, to just be feeling beat up all the time, and just be not being able to bend down and touch your toes a little bit. I think a little bit more emphasis has to be put on the mobility side of things.
Definitely. And I think that's kind of come around. Well, for me, it was when Kelly Starrett started to get people to jam really hard balls into the hips and things like that people started to.
I wonder where you want to go with that.
And then, well, who knows where it's going to go. And then it started to kind of distill from there as the errors with that approach kind of came to light, and it's just like powerlifting program, and it's progressing, and there's more and more research in that field. So I think it's really exciting where that lot's going to go, and finding exactly which mobilizations which clients should use, I think is really fascinating as well. Especially when you start to consider stuff like hypermobility, so like questioning whether everyone should be mobilizing or whether
to do too much as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and like what's too much of one thing.
Come into the gym and spend 30 minutes just throwing everything at this bands and balls,
Yeah.
everything. But ideally, we want to get it as short as possible.
I completely agree.
As targeted as possible.
Yeah.
Not be wasting time. But one of the things Dan said about getting a 20 to 30 minute workout every day.
That's perfect.
That's, it's perfect. Get some blood flowing. Do a couple
Unless you've got time to fasciitis.
The things I've found since I started driving, going back to speaking, I started recording. My recovery going down, I used to do like 20,000 steps a day, easy. Maybe like 8 to 10 now. Recovery has dropped. My hips and my legs. Yeah. Recovery is just not there anymore.
It's amazing.
Training loads dropped.
Simple as just moving can help. But yeah, it's something I used to completely neglect. And I had a job where I didn't move a lot as well, and I just expect to be able to go from being sat down the majority of the day, walk into the gym, do a little bit of a warm up, and carry on, and have no repercussions, which just doesn't happen. I think quite fortunate now in the way that I think that me and Chris do is that we're on his feet the majority of the day, to be honest. So you're moving anyway, but I still dedicate that time to doing it. Maybe do that in the morning, and then when I'm training late afternoon, I do see a benefit. Yeah. I might not even feel like I'm going to get through a session when I get up in the morning, but if I do all that stuff and then have a few hours in between and train, I'm usually fine. I can get through
for me, with like putting in mobilizations, it'll be like if, say, like a client cancels, I'll make sure that I'll have 5 minutes of that hour just doing maybe a little bit of foam rolling. I tend to avoid stretching because I tend to have stupid muscle pulls and weird aches and pains when I do stretches, so I tend to find foam rolling and some, and more like dynamic stretches tend to work for me, but like, everyone's different, that kind of stuff. And to go back to what we were saying before and about people's movement, I'm just really interested to see how you guys like assess people's movement and decide on exactly how people move and what to kind of change from there.
I think you need to look for some like basic components. We talk about the squat, but we want to look for a bar path just roughly up from the midfoot.
Yep.
We want rib cage and pelvis to be neutral torso position, extension or flexion. Obviously, we want to be looking for good bracing, without tightness and stuff like that. In terms of how it actually looks, so long as it's not violating those things, it doesn't really matter how ugly it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody is going to move in their own way with different levers and proportions and everything else. But yeah, you're looking for certain key aspects of each lift, and there's always certain things I like to see with each lift. And as long as they're able to achieve those, regardless, of proportions, and they're going to lift safely, then usually you've got a base to go off.
Yeah.
And then I think it's a case of, as they do become more advanced, you're then going to develop that to take advantage of the levers even more so to make it more efficient. But yeah, initially when you're starting, if you've got somebody who's never squatted or deadlifted before, it's rare you'll get somebody who can come in, get under a bar and just squat to death, no problem. Without any issues such as ankle mobility, full pelvic control, whatever it is, there'll be plenty of that going on. So to teach that from the get-go, I think is pretty massive. But yeah, you've always got your standout kind of warning signs that you're looking for, and then if you can kind of drill them out, look to improve them over time, then you're probably on the right track. But it might even be a case that initially you don't even want them under a bar.
That's it.
Because their movement's that poor.
And
it's something I learned and took on board very quickly when I started PT the first time. I wanted everybody to do the big free lifts, but you very quickly learn that for most people, or your average people, it's usually not an option.
You've got to meet them where they are.
You've got to adapt that and tailor it to them, and then hopefully over time you can get them under a bar. Obviously, if they're interested in powerlifting, then you definitely want to be going down that.
I think that's where, especially when people start training, that they have an idea of what their squat has to. They have a standardised look of what a squat or a deadlift has to be by either seeing some videos on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it might be. But I think, all of us has mentioned it, it's got to be catered towards them. So if they have to take a step back a little bit, and it's like, right, actually, you've got really bad shoulders, right, we're not going to go straight into a back squat. And I don't think it's a bad thing, or people should think of it as a bad thing. Getting stronger and training should be a long-term thing, not just a case of, right, let's do a 6-week program and get your back squatting on, then you're injured. So we've got to do a little bit of rehab and then go again. You've got to keep on top of it and work towards things.
I think something I always came to realise as well was not everybody actually wants to back squat either. You might think it's a great idea for them, and it would be nice for most people to achieve a decent back squat. It's a good exercise, it's useful. But it might be a case that they might not really enjoy it either, but they might really enjoy a goblet squat, or they may enjoy just using a hack squat machine. And if the demands of their day-to-day life don't really necessarily need a back squat, you don't have to do it with them. But we do want to achieve a certain amount of mobility that's going to help them with day-to-day life.
And as a coach, I definitely struggle with that powerlifter's bias. Of always gravitating towards those street lifts, and then I always have to look through programs and think, no, that person isn't a powerlifter, or they're not ready for these, or they're going to have to pull from blocks rather than the floor. I don't need this person pulling from the floor all the time. So that's a whole discussion.
The thing is, though, sometimes, and people probably listening or watching, people will probably, what I found is, I'll hold my hands up. I've trained mainly beginners coming into the powerlifting club, never lifted before. I've only had a handful of people that have gone to competitions, but now, because they've been training for quite a long time, they're gravitating towards becoming intermediate lifters. And I think they naturally, because they're getting stronger, and everybody likes getting stronger, they naturally gravitate towards wanting to compete or go. I think that is a natural progression. Have you found that as well, rather than sort of pushing them towards it? There's a bit of a natural gravitation towards people wanting to compete.
Yeah, I think once people confident with the movement and they start to really enjoy doing it, and then they're putting weight on the bar and they're getting all excited, and then they know they're not going to get injured, and coach is happy with what they're doing. I think it just naturally comes at that point. You're just going to want more, and it's the nature of the sport. At the end of the day, it's all about numbers. So the more weight you get on the bar, you're going to perceive that as some progress. And the next step for that, realistically, is to compete. If you are of that mindset.
And I think a few of us as coaches have taken people on that are already high level, and you realise that some people are just naturally really strong and they still have all the issues that beginners have. So you can actually have beginners that lift much, much better that in terms of their actual movement than the advanced lifters. and it's far less risky. So you always notice that people that have had coaching right from the start, as they go through the levels, tend to last a lot longer in the sport as well. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to throw that in.
It is a point I was gonna throw into it, because when you go in transitioning from that novice to intermediate to hopefully advanced level, I think that's kind of what it ends up being about. You know, I've seen a lot of very strong lifters come and go, and if they maybe had listened and done the right things, they could have been great, but they either didn't last long enough through injury, or they just were too stubborn to listen in general and just didn't get anywhere, start making progress.
That's it, and it's about making them be able to be resilient. It's about getting them bulletproof, isn't it?
The point you made about at the start, Steve, is a case of getting them to meet in the middle in terms of that, looking at kind of executing lifts, but also actually doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think if you can funnel them into that road and then balance that, which is obviously where programming comes in, you're going to get somebody who has to see some success.
Yeah. I think a couple of key things sort of picking out of there, again, just following on that tangent, is a lot of things said about people listening, working with them towards this. Do you think, just on a tangent with novice and intermediates, and Tim, you said at the start, obviously looking at programs and starting strength and that sort of stuff, sort of, hindsight's always 20/20. Would you have looked for a coach straight away? Would you recommend people looking for a coach straight away? Because sometimes people go out and look at stuff, and I can't remember who I was speaking to, but you can get loads of programs online, and I think it was Boris Shako that put a program out there, and it was actually designed for like a junior. And it's like, I want to do that program. Well, that's not actually specific.
So the problem with Shaker programs was that it just put some examples out and didn't really, the translation of business here, I didn't get through. People was about 30%. Wow, it's this amazing Russian secret thing. That's what it was like in 2012. You didn't really have a big choice. So
it's so esoteric and mysterious, isn't it, that people are more attracted to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think. I think now it's a case that there are actually coaches out there. I think even at the point where I started, which is, we're talking like 2014, 2015, I didn't know of any coaches like whatsoever. I just went in the gym and just trained with the guys, and it was a case of, right, we'll let a single today. We'll do a bit of back off volume, and we'll go out. And in all fairness, we all got really strong. Yeah. I think quite fortunately we were all quite aware of technique, at least. So none of us lifted poorly. So it was a case of we kind of were on the right lines, but we're just constantly pushing too hard. Whereas I think a lot of people starting with a program like 531 or starting strength, something like that, it is probably a good place to start. It's an introduction to being under a bar quite regularly. It's a bit more specific to powerlifting. But realistically, you'd run something like that for maybe 12 weeks, and then you get to the end of it, and that's probably it. To be honest, you probably couldn't run it again and get nowhere near the same kind of output from it anyway. So realistically, you'd be looking for something at least a little bit individualised. Whether it needs to be working one-to-one with a coach immediately, maybe not. But it depends on the individual and how much they're willing to learn themselves. I went away and just put so much effort into learning about the lifts and how you would program for powerlifting that I got back quite all right for a long time with it. Whereas people who aren't aware of that, who have the educational background that we have in terms of programming and periodization and everything else, if you don't understand any of that, then you probably are not going to. You're going into it too blind. You're not going to have a clue what you're doing. Yeah. So for people like that who are coming into it, who have an interest but would have no idea what they're doing or how to apply it, I would always push them towards being coached.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the things that I'll say to my clients is that I've been there and made the mistakes, so you don't have to. Yeah. And it is literally about learning from those mistakes. And every little mistake that you make with programming at different competitions, coaching people, you can apply to your next program. So a coach is always learning as well. So that's why I think it's very important to go with a coach that you trust as well, that's been there in the trenches and has helped loads of people, has done hundreds of hours watching videos, rather than. So I think a big problem with athletes is they'll go to like the first coach that they find online, And traditionally they'll be like a really good athlete and they'll have loads of followers and things like that, but they won't actually have any images or evidence of clients that they've worked with. They'll be just really strong themselves. So I really would encourage people to do the homework when they're looking for coaches, and not necessarily go for the best, go for ones that are the most experienced with clients and have evidence of getting those great results.
One of the things first with beginners as well is that I'm not strong enough to have a coach yet.
Yeah, like you build the foundation first and then get strong.
It's a
I think
common thing.
being a beginner is the ideal time to get a coach. Once you've got some understanding of programming principles and how things work, maybe then.
Well, I think that's
it if you want to, but
you make a good point there. I think as a coach as well, that's kind of part of our job. We should be educating them on these principles, because the better they understand it, they'll know why they're doing it, and that kind of is a bit of a driving force to getting them to do it the right way.
Absolutely.
And then in the very worst case, they move on to another coach or whatever, you've at least prepared them for what they're going to do next. And I think that has to be part of the job.
And it's incredibly hard to take someone that has trained for years and years and years wrongly to actually you've been doing that wrong right from the start. You lose all spinal position as soon as you pull on the bar. You don't have any tightness as you squat, and they're thinking, well, I'm already at national competition level. Like, who's this person telling me that I need to change?
He doesn't even lift as much as me.
Yeah,
I think with that,
can't even pull 200 in competition.
I think with that, a lot of people, powerlifting is it's sort of blown up a little bit. There are a lot more coaches out there, and all you have to do is type in on Instagram powerlifting, and a million accounts will come up. And sometimes I think people, again, just a little bit of a tangent. Some coaches will want to make out as though you've done something potentially wrong, or be like, right, we're gonna start it all again. Whereas we started. I think the first part of this was talking about sort of technique, and there's you said there, Dan, there's certain things that you want to look at and make sure that, all right, so we're not too much sort of in the red zone, if you like, that they're doing anything wrong. You don't have to start fully from scratch, but working with a coach, as we've all said, we're all trying to help you and educate you and help you progress, as opposed to let's strip it all back, let's start right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think you can fall into. It's very easy to make someone feel broken as well. So let's say you spot 4 different issues with their squat, their bench, and their deadlift, and it's for you to completely overwhelm that person with all the different changes, and I shouldn't even lift weights. My movement's that bad. So it's about being able to strip those lifts down without the lifter necessarily being aware that you're doing it and addressing these things. So I think there's a lot to be said to addressing issues without overly addressing it with the person. So it just makes their movement better without them having to stress out about it.
Realistically, that's coaching, isn't it? We know all the technical stuff, and we don't need to overwhelm them with that. Our job is to get them there in the easiest and most direct way possible. If they want to know more about it, fine, tell them. But generally, there's no point in overwhelming them, because all that's going to lead to, I think it's another point I made here actually about intermediate lifters, is overthinking. So you then get into this cycle of overthinking, and then that transitions over to competition as well. And it's things like you were saying earlier on, Chris, about people not having a routine and they're changing things every 5 minutes. If you go in and you tell somebody there's several issues with one lift and you need to go away, work this and this, then they're going to go and do that, but it's just not going to click, and they're going to be overthinking absolutely everything, and realistically it just becomes counterproductive, because they're just going to stop getting the work done. And mentally it's just no good for them at all. So I think get talking a lifter into overthinking, but I do think overthinking is something that novice and intermediate lifters now do a lot more of, because there's more stuff out there.
Absolutely.
And it's like, what do I do? Because every coach does it their own way. There's so many programs out there. The elite lifters all do everything their own way, and they might even tell you that's the right way. And it's like, well, what do I do then? Do you know what I mean? I'm starting this, but I have no idea what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden, it's 3 lifts at the end of the day. It's not a very complicated sport.
And I'll encourage my lifters to either to stop researching the lifts, the big 3 anyway, in hopefully about 10 weeks before either testing, or before a competition, just because I've always found that any little bit of information that they want to then apply to the lift, it gets in the way of the ritual, it gets in the way of the subconscious performance of the lift, and that reduces power production and various things like that. So I think there's definitely a point for just going with the technique that you have at the particular point, and you're going to assume that someone has a certain technical proficiency when they're going for a competition or testing anyway. So I think it's very much about, as a coach, being on board with that psychological process and encouraging them to look after that when they're coming up to a big event.
There comes a point where it's just a bit too late.
That's it.
To change
That's it.
Like, you've just got to. You've
just
just
going to be counterproductive at that point.
You've just got to get your head down, work with what you've got, and then when you've got a bit more time, then you can look at that. Another thing I was going to go off, it was a bit of a tangent, but it's another thing that I see novice and intermediate lifters do a lot, is weight control.
Yeah.
So guys who get into the sport initially, again, they can go kind of two ways. They might initially get into it, know their weight, and be like, right, I fit in this weight category, so I'm going to stay in this weight category because this is closest to my body weight, and this is what I'm going to do. And then you get other guys who are immediately taught into just putting on weight. You get bigger, you're going to get stronger. So just keep doing that. You're a relatively tall guy, so just start eating. Just start eating and don't stop until you get to 120. And I think it goes both ways. It's something, again, from my personal experience. When I started, I was about 85 kilos. And I remember for my first competition, I actually think it was Kit, actually, go back to saying that. One of the guys who used to train with us, he said, "Oh no, just do a weight cut. Just go down to 83 for my first competition." At the time, I was like, well, this is what everybody does. So I was like, that's fine. By the time I'd done like a few more months of training, I was heavier again. I was about 87 kilos. And I was like, I'd be fine. And I remember dropping like 4 kilos in a week and like driving up to Ashington with the heaters on in my car, sweating all the way up. And this was my first ever competition. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I ended up performing quite well, as it was my first one. But from that, I think I led myself into a bit of a false sense of security because I performed quite well that day.
Yeah.
And I stayed at 83 for the following 2 years. As realistically, because I wasn't a fat 83 by any means, I should have probably been the one who did move up straight away and committed to a longer term thing and not hold myself back. So it's like a massive mistake I see guys making. They either hold themselves back for too long when they could be making some progress, and it could be years, or they go the other way and they get completely out of shape and they're not actually getting that much stronger, and it's not worthwhile. So like, as a beginner, it's probably okay to stay quite light because you're going to get stronger anyway. But then there comes a point where you start to hit your ceiling, and then you need to assess it. But I think just trying to put yourself in a box from the get-go is a massive
I think that comes back to what we were saying about overthinking a little bit, because for the a couple of beginners that I've coached and want to go into competitions, what weight class should I be in? What should I be doing? And I don't really care about the weight class in your first
something I'll tell so I've got 3 lifters doing their first competition on September 8th. And I've said to those, like, just go and at the weight that you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got one that's like half a kilo over, and like she can just get there through just controlling.
Go to the toilet beforehand, you'll be alright.
Yeah, just eat a meal 2 hours earlier the night before, and she'll be fine. So I don't consider that a weight cut. So for me, that does make sense for there. But in someone's first competition, they're still deciding whether they like lifting in front of a crowd. They're still deciding whether it's worthwhile, whether they absolutely go to shit in front of people when there's that pressure on, when there's a referee watching, and all that, whether they enjoy the whole process of the thing. So to add weight class considerations on top of that as well, when it's someone's first one, when they're already going to be losing sleep and things like that, I think it's just silly. I mean, they do it with the best of intentions, but that's why it's important to have people in your corner that have experience, because they can say stuff like that.
It's as you start progressing as a lifter, I think that's when you can start thinking about, right, actually to be competitive, to push on a little bit more, I might need to go up a weight class. If I'm near the bottom end, drop down a little bit. But that's something as you start progressing and you've got maybe more than a handful of competitions.
You've got to consider when it's appropriate as well. Because weight cutting gets a bit fetishized to powerlifters as being part of the experience, and I've dropped 5 kilos to the weight, and people are to be a big thing.
It's like a sort of a badge of honour, if you like.
It's a badge of honour, but if you're going to cut 3 kilos to come 10th in 93, it's going to come 14th.
Whereas
Does it really matter that much?
No, unless you're at the top end. This is kind of why I've raised it. Unless you are at that advanced level and you're up there, either nationally or internationally, for like medals and potentially, selection and stuff.
Oh, there's definitely a time and a place.
It's not worth it, It's just not, like, especially if you get into the habit of doing it all the time. I'd rather see lifters just be pretty close to weight year round and just making some nice consistent progress.
That's it.
When you're at that level to push, then you can maybe make your call. There's some guys who just tolerate it better as well, even at the beginning. I have had lifters who've only done 2 or 3 comps and they've insisted that they wanted to cut weight as a personal decision. And, you go with it, even if you encourage them not to. If they want to, then obviously you can just advise them on the best way to do it and then see what happens. Usually it's a lesson learned hard way, and they'll not perform as well as they wanted to on the day, and then it eventually starts to sink in. But obviously,
hopefully they trust you with that process to then change it going forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's what I find is everyone, beginners, intermediates, everyone's worried about making mistakes. Everyone's worried about, I had a crap session today. I didn't increase the weight on the bar, or I didn't perform very well at that competition, or whatever it might be. And it's like, that's fine. Like, everyone's human. No one's you can't be perfect all the time. You might not even be able to. You might be struggling for a PBs for a couple of weeks or whatever it might be, and that's fine to do those mistakes, because you can only get better by making them and being like, right, actually, this thing works so well. Especially like us as coaches with programming, we're trying to figure out the best way to get you stronger. It's not going to be right. This thing right here, that's going to get you stronger 100%. It'll help towards it, but it's okay to make mistakes to eventually get stronger.
Yeah, I think part of the coaching process when you are dealing with a novice lifter, even intermediate, even advanced, it's about just helping them learn why a certain mistake has happened.
Yeah.
So normally when like form has gone to shit and you dig into it a little bit, normally they've had like terrible sleep. They're having an absolute disaster at work, and all these different things are going wrong, or they just PB'd the squat the day before, so oh my god, the deadlift isn't the best ever the next day. Like, everything's gone to shit. And no, it's about teaching them that, and an novice lifter just doesn't have that experience to learn that, which goes back to why it's so important to have a coach.
Definitely takes time. I think, if you can guide them down that path as well and teach them that it's okay to make these mistakes, it's what you do with that kind of data afterwards. Remember what you did that caused that, what other lifestyle factors were going on. Because I think it's something, again, people believe that if it's on the spreadsheet, I do this, I'm going to get this result. It's not always the case. There's so many other factors that go into it.
You walk into the gym and think it's an isolated environment, but you've got to remember that any kind of stress has a physiological response in the body. That's it. It's not just training stress.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not eating, if you're not sleeping, whatever, you've had a row with the missus, whatever it is, you could go in and it could potentially affect
Chakras
the
aligned.
Yeah. Something along them lines,
And all of that topic was just the first question, so I hope you're all sitting comfortably. Following on from that, obviously, we sort of delved into a little bit about the psychology of things, sort of overthinking, making mistakes, all that sort of stuff. What have you found? Because I've had it myself as a lifter. I'm sure you three as well. I've had it as well. Whereas if you are lacking a little bit of motivation, I usually get it after a competition, and I'm sort of like, I just want to have a little bit of a break from this, or if someone's had an injury, or if training isn't going very well. How have you found as coaches to have a little bit of a kickstarter when people are demotivated?
I think novelty is a good thing, and just having, first I'll have a catch up with the lifter, just talk about like what they enjoyed about the previous block and what they'd like to go going forward. And I think it's very much about getting someone excited about the process. I think a lot of the time a competition can be, it's like Boxing Day, that anticlimax. It's like, everything's done now. I think there's a lot to be said for making the lifter excited for the next stage, and to talk about the strategy and what's going forward. And you can even start talking about that before the competition has been done. So it's very much about keeping the momentum going rather than the competition being the end of that momentum.
Yeah, there needs to be something to look forward to, I think is a big thing. I think it's obviously a question that I've raised, but yeah, if you have a period of demotivation, and it can come after a competition, but I think it can come at any point for some lifters. But if you get into like a bit of a vicious cycle with that, and training's just not going very well, and then everything's shit, and you're convincing yourself that nothing's going well, I think to change that, obviously, I think it's just assess why, and then obviously maybe just strip it all back, go back to square one, find out why you're not enjoying it. Maybe, as Chris mentioned, go back to some novelty, add some variation back in, maybe train in a way that you haven't trained for a little while. You know, do stuff that you maybe have neglected. Find some enjoyment in training a little bit, rather than taking it too seriously for a little while.
Go back to why you loved it.
And yeah, exactly. That was going to be my next point. Just
Stop reading his notes. Always copying.
So yeah, more the why is what I was getting to.
Yeah.
So just think about why you enjoy training, why you started, and then I think from there you can kind of then get the ball rolling again, start building some momentum going forward. I think as long as you start getting some momentum going again, it'll be fine. So maybe start with a lot of variation and stuff like that, and then maybe once you get back under the bar, start just taking away. Maybe it's something I've done to build my own confidence in the past. Maybe chip some like rep PBs or volume PBs, stuff that like is not right up there, but it's achievable, and you can do it, and you can build a lot of momentum off the back of it, and it keeps you positive as well. So I think get back into that, even if it's something obscure, like a paused safety bar squat. I'm not even bothered what it is. If it's something that makes you feel good and like you're making progress again, then it's going to contribute.
It's ticking those boxes of, you know, those little wins, if you like. Obviously, Chris and Dan have mentioned there about having catch-ups with people in person. What have you found sort of mainly working with lifters sort of online if people are lacking a little bit of motivation?
Again, the catch-up needs to be there, conversation, especially if you're going to be there on the comp day. You know, have a little bit of debrief after the last couple of campaigns, discuss what's going on, but do stuff about it because you know about it pretty much straight away, judging from watching others and stuff. But coach should know what's going on with your lifts.
We hope.
But then purposely after competition, we'll normally go into a pivot kind of restoration block and just make sure that when you are grinding away, getting ready for a competition, that's when burnout starts to get really high, and then you get this big, you know, orgasm of the competition, and then there's nothing after.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be prepared for that. You've got to expect people to drop off the motivation stuff. I mean, I tend to program stuff that doesn't really matter if you half-arse it.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Like the single, because it's restoration as well. I want to lower like the volume, intensity and stuff, and a lot of the joints and stuff. Do a lot of single leg stuff and single arm stuff. A lot more fluffy stuff that's not going to damage them and then build back up. But also, by the time we've had 3 weeks of that, we're hungry to get back into proper training again. We're motivated ourselves.
Make a vista bar a little bit.
Yeah.
So give them 3 weeks of tempo squats. They're going to be hungry to do sets of 5 again.
Have you found there's certain clients that when you put them on a pivot or some kind of like high rep scheme that they struggle with the lack of context as to how it translates to their lifts at the end of the day? So like they're doing sets of 8, they have no idea how that
absolutely.
reacts.
I just need to spur a conversation about what they're doing.
Goes back to what
your coach should be discussing with your athlete.
Yeah,
You know, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. And how
It's just how it translates.
detail you give to that, it depends on the client. You know, it might be
absolutely.
the slightest. There might be someone that, you know, your natural overthinker wants to know why you're doing everything. And so long as it doesn't get to the point where they're questioning every single thing you say, they're actually having some respect for you as a coach and not, you know, overthinking everything. Because then you're not actually doing your job as a coach because you're allowed to continue to think, set some boundaries. But
I think,
know why you're doing it.
You're right there, Chris, in terms of just give them a why. You know, tell them why they're doing it. If they want a bit more detail, fine, give them it. And as long as they can go away and be like, right, that's fine, no worries, I know what I'm doing now, then you've kind of tackled that there. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that go into programming. There's a lot of stuff like that I've given certain lifters of mine and they've not done certain exercises before, post-comp usually, and it's stuff that I've really wanted to do with them, but there's always a time and a place where you've got more time, and then all of a sudden you're giving them a single leg RDL and they're falling over, and they're like, why am I doing this? And you can explain why, but they've probably never done it before, and especially if you've had a lifter, like you said, quite experienced already, but they've only trained pretty specific to barbell work, and you know, and that's all they've done. My prime example, I don't think she might be saying it, is Mariella. She's a world champion, but she'd barely done any corrective work or unilateral work or anything, which I was amazed at. Like to start with, I was like, I can't believe you've not ever done any of this. Since implementing this stuff, we've addressed so many issues with it. But initially, she was like, "This is stupid." She's like, "I don't like you. I don't like why."
I feel like a dickhead.
Sometimes that's what we've said. You know, it'll get to her ceiling, if you like, doing what she's been doing has obviously got her to become, a world champion. Just think about adding that in there from being a good lifter, if you like, and then progressively getting, even better. And people's ceilings are a little bit different. You can get quite a long way by just doing this similar sort of things. And sometimes it's just like, right, actually, let's work on these smaller exercises a little bit. Let's work on a little bit of core strength or stability. Let's work on movement. Let's work on this or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden your ceiling's gone from about there to being like, whoa, actually, we've got a little bit more room to work with now. We can push it a little bit more. Sort of going into the motivation, or moving on from the motivation side of things, I think that was quite a good response from that question. The sort of third big question, if you like, before some of the questions that were sent in by you guys, is training loads and intensities for male and female lifters. Obviously, there's been quite a big influx of women getting involved in powerlifting, which is really, really good. And some of the, like what we mentioned before, some of the programs that people will start Googling and that sort of stuff maybe don't take into account the difference between the sexes, or people will start getting a training program that's just a little bit too intense, which is actually designed for, 4 weeks out from competition, as opposed to the longer picture. So what would you recommend in terms of loads and intensities for males and females, and sort of the differences in how you would change loads and intensities as you're progressing the programs?
So for me, there's actually been quite a bit about this recently, because as you've said, a lot more females have got into the sport. So it's given us some data to actually work with in terms of what we do with females and how that would differ to males. On a physiological level, we're not really that different. But the differences that are apparent usually are males just tend to have quite a bit more muscle mass, purely upper body usually. And that's usually the main difference between the two. We usually tend to have more muscle mass in terms of cross-sectional area, which usually means more muscle damage, which means more time to recover usually. Okay, so that's usually the main difference. Females tend to be smaller than males in general in terms of frame size. So muscle size is usually less as a result. Physiological stress in terms of muscle damage and neurological stress is less. So
not strong enough to do that much
enough work a lot
to recovery depth.
Until we get to like the extremes, that's the general rule that we go. And then, so as a result of that, what we can come to see is women can tolerate a lot more frequency, generally higher intensity in terms of relative to male and female, and volume can be higher. They recover better than we do.
Have you found that's the same with women in higher weight classes? Because I would say like they would recover a lot worse than.
It depends on the level. I would say, yeah, in terms of general stress on the body, potentially. But what you tend to find with women in the higher weight categories is they tend to carry more body fat than the males in the higher weight classes. So not so much because the loads that they're lifting relatively still aren't that high. So they would still recover better than a male the same weight. Yeah. Definitely. They recover quicker, and you can still put them through more loads, more frequency. Definitely. Yeah. I agree. Again, until you get to the extreme end of it.
So how that presents is you might see that your female lifter, say with a bench and row at max, can do a double with something really close, put 2.5 kilos on, and they'll fail a single.
Yeah.
Things like that, they can operate a lot closer to their 1 rep max potential.
Yeah, I've seen a female be able to do a set of 4 at 95%.
Yeah.
You try and give that to the majority of males who are even intermediate. No chance.
Yeah,
no chance. So that does tend to be the case, but then the female bench max might only be 60 kilos. The male that we're talking about might be 140. So there's a big difference in terms of relative load, but they generally can work closer to a max in terms of intensity. So you can put them through generally just more work. Yeah. It's most of the females I've worked with, you can get them squatting 3 times a week. You can get them deadlifting 2 to 3 times a week. You can get them benching near enough every day. As long as you're undulating everything properly, they just keep recovering from it up to a certain level. And as long as they are moving well and doing all the other right things, you can just put them through more work as a general rule.
think that's not like it's not a negative thing either. I think when sometimes when women are coming in and wanting to get involved in strength training, yes, there might be a few differences in terms of like maybe the training variables, but they can still do the same exercises that the fellas are doing. It's not a case of powerlifting. This is the bloke section. This is where you've all got to lift. I think
that's gone now.
At this point, in terms of powerlifting, I think there's a lot more women beginners that have been coming to the sessions that I run, and sometimes the fellas, and it's good to see. I mean, there was it last year in Calgary? Jen Thompson had won it 10 years in a row, and I don't think she won it. Was it last year? Was it last year in Calgary?
Yeah, this year in Sweden as well.
Yeah, but even just watching, watching the women compete, it is growing as a sport.
I've seen higher numbers of female lifters than males at a couple of competitions that I've been doing recently, which is incredible.
I think there was more female lifters than males at this year's Worlds.
That's amazing.
To be honest, I think that was the figure. Yeah, so it's definitely growing, and the standard at the top end as well. It's not just the males now that have what you class as elite lifters.
Yeah.
Like the elite standard of females in pretty much every weight class now is coming along.
Yeah.
So it is great to see. But yeah, in terms of the differences, no, you wouldn't train them any differently in terms of the movements that you can do. Or anything like that. It is literally the differences you're talking about, the basic stuff like your frequency, volume, your intensity. They're the variables that you adjust. But in terms of the way that you train a male and female, it wouldn't really change.
And it all boils down to training that individual as well, and finding what they respond to.
What you might overlook is having to account for the menstrual cycle.
I was going to ask it as well. Yeah.
So I've coached women that are just unable to operate.
Of course.
Stuff like that.
Especially if they're sumo deadlifters, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot to be said.
So, if that's every 4 weeks, you might just looking for every 4 weeks to account for it, especially get them to track it as well.
Yeah.
So, if they're going to come week 4, shark week, then you need to make accommodations to that. And,
I think it's massively important. I've got some females, and when it is that time of the month, they're actually at the strongest, and then you have others, and there's a massive drop off. And I mean, obviously, there's plenty of data to suggest like injury risk and everything else is higher around that point as well in other sports, not just in powerlifting. So you have to take these things into account. But if they're aware of when that drop off's going to happen and they understand that, and you can account for that in programming, then there shouldn't be much of an issue. Yeah. But if you're trying to get them to get through the work regardless, and you're just going to put that same demand on them, it's going to be too stressful physically and mentally. It's something that you definitely have to take into account.
I think that's where, again, we've said throughout this chat, that's when you need to start working with a coach, because if you just get a random program out there and it's the 4th week and you've got to do the intensity is increased a little bit, and it's like, not going to be able to do this. You need to be able to have that chat with your coach to be like, right, actually, let's change it around this week, but still get some quality work done, as opposed to just smashing your head a brick wall and not getting it.
Yeah, and I think that's why RPE has been so important as well.
Yes.
Because it gives people that option. So, like, if there's an intensity that you know is going to be like touch and go, whether they're actually going to be able to do it, you can have that option of or to a 9 RPE or to an 8 RPE if the percentage isn't there that day. Which is why I think the science around powerlifting has been such a positive progression recently. So people have more options, and that will keep people training and keep people making progress.
And as well, again, from your side as a coach, communicating that it is okay to do that as well. If you have a week, it's not necessarily for females. If you're just having a generally bad week, you're a bit beat up, or you're stressed, you're not slept. It's okay to be able to auto-regulate in your session and squat 20 kilos less than you did last week. If that is going to get you to that target RPE, it's fine. And to get your lifters to understand that, that I think that's massive, because you still have guys, and I have a lot of them, who are that stubborn, and they will want to hit a certain number when they go in, which again is cool. You should have a number in your head that gives you a goal. But if it isn't there, or you know that you're potentially just going to be overreaching way too much, then it's okay to run in a little bit. It doesn't matter. But if you can get your lifter to understand that, especially that example of a female in that point of the menstrual cycle, then you're going to go a long way, I think, in terms of progression.
I think and this was a question that was sent in. I think it follows on quite nicely about loads and intensities and the programming side of things, and working with the RPE. A couple of people is sort of the taper leading into a competition, and you look at different lifters. At the top end, everyone has like a different process that they'll follow. And as coaches, I'm sure there's been different protocols and templates that you've used depending on the person. Do you all just want to chat a little bit about your take on the taper? How long should it be? What's involved? What are your experiences with tapering people towards competition?
I think initially when you work with somebody, if you've not tapered them before, unless they've got a lot of background data they can give you about how they react to a taper, then you're going in a little bit blind. Not everybody's going to react the same. There's certain principles that I'd generally stick by, and I know Tim likes to kind of do the same in a lot of ways.
Understand the protocol, but just
and then just change each competition.
And then there is a difference again though between males and females, so we could definitely go back to that. A female, if generally, you would be able to taper pretty late, to the point where some girls you could probably have a bench the day before, and they'd be fine. They'd probably perform just as well as if they didn't bench for 2-3 days before. Maybe better.
The beginner female on a PB on Wednesday and PB on Saturday.
And that can happen. Whereas like you've got an intermediate to advanced male lifter, there's general principles you might want to. I think we're all aware that like deadlift especially is the most fatiguing of the three for most people anyway, not everyone, but for most people. You might want to look at tapering that down from maybe 3 weeks out. You'd still be deadlifting, but you might want to drop off definitely the volume and the intensity will come down at the end. But I think for me personally, that's worked well for me. 3 weeks. It does kind of take me that time, especially when I start doing singles regularly on deadlift. It takes me that time to kind of get over that and actually be able to feel like I want a deadlift by the time I get to competition. There is that fine line. You shouldn't be feeling completely fresh, but at least your body should be ready to do it. Squat, maybe looking at 2 weeks out, depending on the level of the athlete, and then bench a week maybe. Like you can even guys like even myself, I could probably bench work up to 140 or something 2 days a day before, and it would make no difference to my performance on the platform. Going off the data that I've got on myself anyway. So yeah, it's about tailoring it for the individual. Like I say, the basic principles of looking at each lift and how fatiguing you are. Yeah, bear that in mind. But you might get some guys who can deadlift right up to a week before and still relatively heavy, and they'll be fine. But other guys, you might be talking 3-4 weeks tapering it down to get the best out of them, especially if squat intensity is up there as well. So it's just a case of monitoring it.
And it definitely takes a few competitions with someone to realise exactly what works. Like you go in to make mistakes at someone's first competition, probably the second and probably the third as well. But it's just very important to keep gathering that data and gradually making that process better for them. So okay, we'll try and taper your deadlift down from 3 weeks out this time, and see. Oh yeah, there we go. 1 sec.
Live things probably.
Live stream's off.
All right.
Just tap that. No, I don't know. Yeah, we might as well share it, and then we'll just go back to going live again.
Yeah.
So perhaps top that camera top left, Chris.
There.
No.
Oh.
Go back to going live again.
Oh shit.
Sorry, mate.
No, you're alright.
You just play it over.
Yeah.
Let's just watch it back. Let's just loop it again.
Just loop it again through all the cameras. Twice.
Okay. Timmy, you in there?
And we're back in the room.
Yeah.
Just a little technical error there. Yeah, with the tapering, I think it has to be because everyone will respond a little bit different. Tim, what have you found?
Generally the same. Once you get to that peaking block, start chipping away at your volume, tapering it down slowly. Tend to keep the intensity pretty high. Some people will have still hit their owners on the 1 day a week competition, particularly bench, maybe a squat. Again, depends on the experience, how strong they are to recover. But you should, through the LPF cycle, kind of get an idea once you put like heavy sets in, heavy singles and things like that, you kind of get an idea of how they recover, how they get out of things next week, stuff like that, and just start building from that picture that you've got for yourself from your prep block. One thing I will say, when relying on RP and stuff like that, you need to be aware of your client's expectations and their psychology and stuff. You might find, say, you give them an RP and then a single 2 weeks out, trying to figure out whereabouts the second attempt's going to be. If you don't know them about well, we might hit an RP, you'll have an absolute grind, completely ruin the peak.
Yeah.
But when you're building a relationship with a client, you should have that idea of that person and know that that's not appropriate.
Yeah, so when you know that if they're a kind of intense person, their RPE is definitely going to be an
It's going to
RPE
overshoot,
10. So you'll program them an RPE 7 instead, kind of thing like that. I think
I
that's
might
so
even
important.
just keep it percentage based.
Option, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think that's where
Why
it
we
comes.
trust the time
That's where it becomes a little bit specific to the person, because I think when it comes to powerlifting, there isn't a one size fits all. Yes, there's things that will work. You know that will work, but in terms of actually like, right, if you are going to start using RPE, sort of you can play it around a little bit to either drop it back so that they're not overshooting, or especially in a taper, and they've like, I know some people that have like missed all of their RP 9 singles, and it's like, oh, shit, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I've not hit anything. Going into a competition, you want to be building confidence. You don't want to be thinking, oh, well, you've not hit any of these.
I do think that's a massive part of it. There are times where you maybe could do more, but there's sometimes a case where less is more.
Yeah.
Especially in that, you are looking at moving a weight well, and at the end of the day, it's practice for the competition. That's why you're doing it. So if you're not developing that skill of being under a heavy weight and moving it well because you're grinding everything or you're failing it, then how do you expect that to carry over when you actually need to do it? It's never ever going to work. So yeah, I agree with the RPE stuff. It depends on the individual, and you get too many guys. Guys are worse fit than girls. Girls tend to be a lot better behaved with RPE than guys. As a general rule, they'll actually be pretty close for the main kind of bulk of it. But yeah, you can control that by either setting a percentage or putting a cap on it. You can, put the RP at 9, but you don't fucking squat more than 220, no matter what.
Yeah.
And if you do it that way, then obviously you've got some control over it, because you know the person, and you know that if they do any more than that, even if they magically do move it well, they're probably still doing a bit too much. So, but that all comes with working with somebody over time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key thing that you said there is, within the taper, you want to have that control a little bit, and keep on top of your lifter a little bit more. The further out it is, when you're doing volume and all that sort of stuff, it's a little bit like, in terms of team sports, rugby and football, you want to be playing your best rugby near end of season. Your taper is sort of like near the end of it. That's where you want everything sort of coming together, as opposed to missing things, having poor sessions, that sort of stuff. So hopefully, whoever sent that question into me, that sort of answered it for you. The next one, which was sent in, was we said at the start that some people can be, for beginners to intermediates, can be really, really technique based, or a little bit scared of putting weight on the bar. So this question that was sent in is improving pelvic control in the squat. So I'm going to say that what you're asking is, when you're squatting and you're having a little bit of a butt wink or hips tilting backwards and forwards. What have you thought for cues for addressing that? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? What's sort of your thoughts on that technique?
What you tend to see when people got butt wink going, so starting an extension, going through a squat, losing that extension, going into neutral, finding and flex. Because you've not got pelvic control, they've not addressed it, they've not thought about it, but you probably don't even know what you mean when you say pelvic control. So that's a conversation to be had. And then we can discuss like neutral torso positioning concepts and stuff like that, and maybe build some drills to teach you what it is first, then build that into the squat pattern. So we're looking at stuff like dead bugs, bird dogs.
And kind of getting them to engage with that feeling of keeping everything under
Things
control.
like cat camels, and just get someone to do a cat camel. Right? This is when you're in extension. This is when you flex.
Yeah, they need to know like how it feels. Like their proprioception of it needs to be pretty good.
Most people haven't got good proprioception for
No.
nobody at all.
If they can actually learn to control it and know how it feels to be a neutral, to be an extension, and all the rest of it, then that at least gives them an idea of probably how it should feel during a squat as well, once you start implementing it into a squat. I actually watched a really good YouTube video on this the other day. It was JP Couch and put one out. I would recommend going and watching that. It's about 20 minutes long and it's literally just about pelvic control and a drill from start to finish. The most basic way to do it, to progress it all the way into a squat. That'd probably do a better job of the time that we've got to explain.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that, it comes into something that we mentioned already as well, which is breathing and bracing. That also helps in terms of pulling everything into a more neutral position through the squat. So learning to brace is a big one, but that isn't all of it when it comes to actually controlling what your pelvis is doing. What I'd also say is not everyone is going to be able to maintain a perfectly neutral pelvis, if you like, at the bottom of a squat. Regardless of how good you get at controlling of it, a lot of it's going to have to do with your morphology and how you're made. So if you're at the bottom of the squat and you've got a bit of butt wink, maybe go away and try and address it. But if there's always a little bit and it just isn't going away, don't waste too much time getting obsessed with it.
And I think it's very important to realise that good form and good technique is a range rather than a set position. So if there's a little bit of butt wink, that's going to be a lot better than a lot of butt wink when a lot of things go. So if you get to a position where you've made things a lot better, but it's not perfect, we're never going for perfection because that's probably not going to happen. So as long as you can get into that healthy range, then that's what you should be aiming for rather than absolute perfection on every single lift.
A key statement is that, I'll try and say to not just the sort of powerlifters that I'll work with, but anyone who's wanting to get stronger, lose fat, whatever it might be, you're chasing progress, you're not chasing perfection. There might not be that perfect rep. Yeah, you might look back on a video and think, wow, yeah, that was spot on. But you're looking for what's optimal for you. So going through like the cat-cows and that sort of stuff to find what works for you. And exactly as Chris says, look, if a little bit and you're not getting any pain, it's not slowing down the weight on the bar or anything like that, then fine. It's a little bit like what we said at the start. We just want to work through and make sure what's going to be correct for you.
I think if it's obvious that there's literally no control whatsoever, and as Tim said, your obvious is starting an extension, coming through, and then ending up really bad flexion at the bottom. I think if there's something like that going on, then it's quite obvious that there's no control whatsoever. So if we can at least limit that,
dangerous to add load to that.
If we can at least limit that to a safe range, which is again is different for everyone. You get some really great squatters who have quite a lot of butt wink, but they don't get injured and they get along fine. And you get other lifters who can do it and it doesn't even move, and that's great as well. But as long as it's safe and you're not getting any issues from it, and you're not completely switching stuff off as a result, then I think you're probably going to be on the right track. But learning to actually just control it before you even implement it into a squat is probably the way forward. But there's quite a lot of drills you can do. A lot of them we've already discussed.
And gradually applying it to tempo stuff and gradually challenging that bottom position in the squat and getting them to really own that pelvic stability and everything, and building on that work that you've done away from the squat.
I think that should be the starting point. I think sometimes you just want to be like, right, how can I make you do this whilst you're squatting? I think sometimes, like I said at the start, doing the mobility stuff beforehand and in between sessions, and then gradually start adding it in.
Transition.
Is there anything else you wanted to say on that?
I think another thing to look at is whether people are setting up appropriately. If you have someone that their morphology probably suggests that we need to bring slightly wider stance, toes out, and they're really narrow, toes forward, when they get to the bottom, approaching the hole, the femurs are going to be in the way of the torso.
It's going to happen anyway.
As an online coach, how would you go about knowing whether they should be wide or narrow?
Part of my intake process is reviewing video footage, so it'll come up there.
Yeah.
And then you can address it once you've seen it. One thing that people can do is look at a hip scour physio assessment. I think JTS and Enoch have one out there. As an article or a YouTube video, whatever. Go and find it and you'll see what they do. But you can do that yourself without someone moving you around. And that'll tell you what kind of position you need to be in at the bottom.
Could we maybe put some links to that in?
100%. We'll put some links on it. It's getting all very professional doing this,
Don't mess about, do it?
Definitely. No, I agree with that as well. I also think, I touched on bracing a little bit. Getting people to brace properly, I think, if you actually sometimes implement a belt pretty early on. Not necessarily to put them under any load, but to teach bracing and how it should feel. I think for me, it's a really, really good physical cue, because you can teach somebody, how to move the pelvis, how to brace, but you can't really feel what's going on as such. Whereas when you put a belt on, if you're bracing correctly, you pull the ribcage down, kind of pushing out into your oblique, you will feel that. You'll feel that like trunk expansion that we're looking for all the way around.
It'll give you some pushback.
And it'll give you an idea that you're not doing it wrong. Yeah. So I think it's something I get guys to do relatively early on. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to get them squatting in a belt, but it's always a good cue to teach bracing from a physical standpoint. You can actually feel something going on. And I've seen a lot of success doing that. So you don't necessarily want somebody to rely on a belt, but it can help.
Yeah,
I think if you've got someone that's not got a belt yet, just an exercise band, like one of those little thin booty builder bands, or the instant shoes.
Anything that builds that
Put a
proper
Put a circle around your belly.
Yeah, I think breathing is one of those things. Again, it's one of those small things that I think when people first start getting involved in powerlifting, some people, in fact, you know what? I actually saw this at the start of the week, and they may as well put a belt on as though they were just putting it around the jeans to hold the jeans up. It's a little bit like, I don't have an issue with anyone wanting to use a belt when they first start training, or buying a belt and be like, look, I bought a belt, I want to get involved in powerlifting, I want to do this. That's absolutely fine, but it's like anything, it needs to be used. It needs to be used properly, or else, the whole point of it. Say you think, I've got a belt now, I'm gonna whack 200 on bar and I'm gonna squat that. Right? Well, no, the belt doesn't make you. Yes, it can add a little bit to your lifts, but it's not the be all and end all. You still need to be able to use the belt properly and brace, rather than just trying to keep your singlet together.
That's the key that you've just said there, knowing how to use it properly. Yeah. If somebody says, I've just gone and got a belt, it's going to keep my back safe now. It's not how it works. So as long as you know how to use it and the reason why you're putting a belt on, then fine. You probably will get something out of it, but until you actually know how to use it, you've not really any business putting one on.
Yeah. So just because the SPD belt is really expensive, that isn't a belt that's going to make you still have to be able to use it. Even if you're using one from Strength Shop or anything, you've still got to be able to use it.
I think more so with the SPD belt, it's so punishing. Like if you don't use it, that thing's fucking brutal.
When you breathe against it, it's like just hitting a brick wall. Like, oh my god!
It's cleared a few ribs, I think.
So there's a lot to be said for building up to an SPD belt rather than going straight to it.
So obviously,
Strength Shop. You're all good.
We've touched on there on obviously being able to do things properly, and this was a question that was sent into Tim, which I think was actually really, really, I thought this was a good idea really, and it's sort of good and bad exercises. So things that, for me, I think we touched on it a little bit, obviously knowing about your why. I think you can, there's certain exercises done properly that are good, but there's sometimes people just throw a load of shit at the wall and think, right, what's gonna try? So good and bad exercises, which ones are your go-to? You want to go around the table? Who wants to start on this? Good and bad exercises to use?
I think a squat, bench and deadlift are a good place to start.
Yes, they are for powerlifting. Everyone make note of that. Squat, bench, deadlift, they need to be in your program.
I think variations of the main lifts tend to be the most successful. For me, generally learning to pause something is always a good idea. Potentially adding tempo as well. So anything that could teach you to perform movement a bit more efficiently and develop more control over the movement is probably going to be a good exercise. It's when you start straying too far away from the movement and then expecting it to carry over that you might start getting an issue.
I think with bad exercises, you tend to find there's more misapplication.
Exactly.
I remember as a beginner lifter deciding that I needed to squat and my shoulders weren't good, so I'll do two things at once and improve my shoulder stability by doing overhead squats. Difficult.
Does not surprise me.
There's no progression there. So you're just going to be doing the empty bar every week and not getting stronger at anything. Whereas if you do things that you squatted appropriately and there's some shoulder stability stuff appropriately, I would have made progress in that 2.5 weeks there.
Yeah, it's all about weighing up the risk and reward. And so the reward of doing burpees 2 weeks before a powerlifting competition are going to be absolutely zero. I mean, mind you, the benefit of doing burpees is pretty much minimal most of the time, to be honest. Yeah, so
unless you're wearing a belt to keep that core brace, so then you know.
All in the thoracic spine. Yeah. So yeah, like the guys say, it's about application rather than good and bad movement, because there's always a context.
Yeah, I think putting it in a box like that, saying just good or bad, is difficult, because there's not so many terrible exercises if you apply them in the right context. There's certain things that you would never apply to a peaking phase for powerlifting. You know, you've likely, I mean, I probably have seen it done at some point, but you probably won't put box jumps in there. You know, you probably won't put any plyometric stuff or anything that's high risk in terms of training.
West side.
Yeah, you probably won't be adding like 100 kilos of band tension each side, you know, and a lot of stuff like that that's high risk and not really going to carry over. So I think you just be sensible with your choices more than anything.
Absolutely.
And again, some people will see more out of certain exercises than others, which is a go-to for me. I do actually enjoy using bands for squatting, and I always find I get something from it. Yeah. The next guy will hate it, and he might just get hurt.
Yeah.
So you know,
or they're not invested in it, so they're going to put in
that's
much
the
effort
thing,
and
you
things
know,
like that.
with accommodating resistance, it is a little bit. Again, some people will be really, really like. For example, like some of the pause stuff, pause deadlifts for me absolutely batter me. It absolutely takes out. Whereas
do it for 6 months.
I
needed them though.
Yeah, it's got to be specific. It's got to be specific to the person, and I think some people, it is too easy to say that's a bad exercise, let's not do it. But yeah, exactly what Chris was saying, the risk to reward ratio, and knowing you know why you're doing it. I think sometimes what can be overlooked when you look at the variations is the one that you want to make it too complicated. So you've got chains and bands, and then you've got a band pulling it up, and then the bar's on fire. Like sometimes that's a little bit too complicated. Just keep it simple. Yeah, and the high box, yeah. It can get a little bit too carried away. Whereas something dead simple, like you said there, Dan, right? Let's have a longer pause on your chest when you're benching. In powerlifting, you've got to pause the bench on your chest. Too many people will bounce off. Squats, people can absolutely drop down dead fast, and as you come up, like Tim said at the start of the chat, you know, you just got a good morning. It's adding in tempos, that sort of stuff. Just be a little bit smarter with what you're using. I think
movement selection is very much about challenging where they find difficult and where they need to improve.
Yeah.
So if they always skip the pause on a bench, give them a 5-second pause bench press. They're probably going to cut it short at 2 seconds, but they're doing a much better pause than they were doing before. Yeah. Another thing that can happen with powerlifting is we get into absolutes of this movement is bad, and this movement is good. And for example, you might talk about spinal flexion. And people, normally in powerlifting, like you can say that some spinal flexion and extension and moving through that can be bad, but if someone has goals like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well, if they're not strong with their spine inflection, then they're going to run into injuries and things like that. So you've very much got to take into account the context of where people are training, because very few people are actually professional powerlifters, so they're going to need different positions.
It's good when you look at, I like to liken it to when people chat about nutrition. Everybody knows that there's foods that you should eat more of, and there's foods that you should eat potentially less of. With exercise, I think there's some exercises that are going to be a little bit better. You should do a little bit more of. There's some exercises that, okay, they're not the best in the world. We're going to just try and do a little bit less of those. Because some people might ask, I want to do a banded, changed, bar on fire deadlift. All right, well, we're going to put it in, but we haven't do a lot.
Yeah, and I think the novelty factor of the exercises that are coming out, like single arm Chinese planks on one leg with your eyes closed and things like that, it muddies the waters further for beginners, and they're going to like struggle to, well, what the hell should I choose? There's like literally a million, there's a million variations of a squat. So again, it goes back to getting a coach and even help you do the foundations and choose the right exercises.
Yes, it's very easy to overcomplicate it as well, as what I say with exercise selection. You know, especially with powerlifting, because I think compared to pretty much any other sport, the amount of detail we go into in terms of programming and what we look at and how far in front we look is it's like another level even compared to most of the professional sports I've worked in. it's cool because it lets us think about programming a lot, and we can delve into a lot of new theories and stuff like that. But a lot of people completely overdo it. You stick to some relatively basic principles, and just be smart about the movements you're selecting. Look at the weaknesses of the athlete. Give an educated guess on this exercise selection that this is going to help. Run it for a long enough period of time. See what the result is. Usually, if you are well educated, you'll get a result out of it as long as they're executing it well and the loads are right and everything else. And then you can push on and it'll tidy something up. But you wouldn't put something in there just because, this looks fun.
And
there's a time and a place for that.
One of the most important things for a coach to do is to kind of shield the person from that complication and all that extra stuff that they might be thinking about, and distilling it so it's really digestible for them. So something that I've talked about on social media stuff is like when you're trying to change a movement, you should be able to think about that change in less than 5 words. Hopefully less than 3, maybe even 1 word. Like if you there's like a power word that just changes a lot of things with that movement, rather than all these advanced concepts that we're bringing in. There's no point in all that because that's going to take away from the rituals and the subconscious performance of the lift and everything like that. So that's why we should be information sponges, and we should be making it simple for people rather than overcomplicating it. I don't know where that came from, but
with sort of keeping it simple, and when you're working with clients sort of online, how does that work with how you go about setting your programs?
I think it's keeping it as simple as possible and never simpler.
Yeah.
We don't want to distill it down too much to the point where you're not transferring that message. But again, it comes down to communication. People are checking in with you, and you need to communicate. Communicate what you need to do, but when you can't cue someone in person, you need to make sure that they understand what you want them to do, and that they can then have a process to implement that.
Yeah.
So what I tend to do is get people, have a discussion, say this is what we need to do. I want you to distill this message into 5 words. I want you to write it on a piece of paper. I want to put it where you can see it while you're walking on squat, or read it before you set up the bench, or have it on the floor for and just have some simple cues. Actually, I mean quite a lot that are repeatable. But you don't want a busy brain while you're setting up.
That's so important.
I think the whole coaching side of it, it's one thing I don't try and be completely black and white with it with all my lifters, but I do make it quite clear that your job is to go and lift the weights. I want feedback from you. I want to understand these things. I want to take data from you so that I can fine tune that process. But your job is to just go and lift the weights. Yeah. So keep it as simple as that. Go and do the simple things right. Do it day in, day out, and you will get a result if you go away and do that. Just give me some feedback, but don't get too emotionally invested in the whole thing, because you end up again going back to the overthinking thing, and then it becomes too complicated. If you just go away and do what you're supposed to do in every sense, not just what's on the sheet, you're going to get a result from it. And providing that process is ongoing and there's communication, you'll be fine. But you don't need to be questioning every single thing that's in front of you. Just kind of get on with it.
I think when powerlifting can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it, and I like to keep it nice and simple, because basically you walk onto the platform and the referee tells you exactly what to do. You're just told what to do, you pick it up, put it down, you squat when they tell you to squat, you press when they tell you to press. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And you said it right at the start, Chris. Think about your routine when you're walking up to the bar. The only difference is that, right, you got to hang on a little bit, bar loaded. Right, now start going through that same process. Still the same bar, still the same weight on the bar. You don't have to be thinking, oh God, it's on a carpet instead of wooden platforms in the middle or whatever it is. Just think about that same process, and then obviously you become a little bit more uniform with everything that you're doing. I thought it was quite interesting going back to exercises. Another question that I got sent in, and obviously there is, we've all mainly competed in the IPF. I know, Chris, you've competed in ABPU. There are quite a lot of different federations out there, and each federation has got sort of slightly different rules. So a question that I got sent in is when it comes to the bench press, which is heels down in the bench press and then heels up in the bench press. Obviously, different federations will use different ones, or certain things are allowed. For me, I'm not 100% sure on this one. I'll hold my hands out. I'm not, as all three of you have probably seen, my bench is not the best. So what is your take on that? Is there a reason it's one better than the other?
So with my approach to the bench press, like just in case they are going to compete in the biggest federation, which is the IPF, I'll teach them to have a flat foot just in case. I see the heels up variation as more risky. I think it puts more pressure on the knees. I think it cranks up the tension on the lower back as well. I think you actually get less leg drive in most cases when you've got the heels up.
I'd say 90% of people doing heels up are only putting the heels up because they're allowed to. We don't know what we're doing.
There's no reason
why
to
we're doing it. We're just doing it because if you set up with your feet in the same place, you tend to get, once you've got your shoulders down and your hips down and your heels are still up, we're going to do a flat-footed bench. Most people in that position, your knee's going to be lower than your hips, you might get a little bit more of an arch out of it. But if you just try and push through that position, then you've less stability, especially lateral stability side to side. If you get a wonky hand off, you're going to be fucked down.
If you're insisting on keeping all the weight in your feet, you're going to be all over.
So if you just slide your feet out from that position and get flat-footed, you will feel a lot more stable.
And I almost keep it like imagine you're doing a sumo deadlift and just pressing into that floor and going from there. You're going to build so much more stability in that position.
So what I tend to keep people do is to pretend they're sat on an office chair and slide themselves back. So I want people to kind of, if you imagine the shoulders on the bench is kind of like a pivot and you're going to push yourself up higher and higher. So as you push yourself up the bench, you're getting your chest closer to your chin. That's going to raise that contact point and get less range of motion. I find it harder to do that when my heels are up. And with me not competing in the IPF event, I'm just benching for benching's sake. I don't need my heels to be down. If I can get into a tight position while I'm setting up and it ends up there, one heel might still be up because I'm tight on one side and the other, or both might be up. It still doesn't feel good to be in that position. It doesn't feel stable.
I think one thing you'll see between federations is a very different take on benching style in general, not necessarily just the feet. So if you look at an untested federation that allows you to be on your toes and then you're allowed to raise your head as well, what you'll actually find is a lot of these guys are rested pretty much on the shoulder blades. They're not actually very high up in an arch. In fact, I'd dare say the majority of the arch is through the lumbar spine. And as a result, when they are bringing the bar down, that is why the head's lifting, because they're so flat into the bench and they're almost trying to use a little bit of heaving, a little bit of momentum to get that going. Generally, because the pause is not as long, they can get away with that. So obviously they're working within the rules of that federation, so they're taking advantage of the rules. So I think either way, whichever way you can bench the most weight, go for that. Personal preference, I do prefer heels down. I feel stronger. I think if you're setting up properly, there should be plenty of tightness through your quads. Feet should be well screwed into the floor, and that should translate over to full body tightness, and you should have a good base to press off. If you can do that, then fine. If you can do that with just your toes on the floor, also fine. But again, like Tim said, I think a lot of people just do it because a lot of people on Instagram do it. And
I think in a time when you can have more surface area on the floor, you've got to be more stable, so you've got to be able to press from a more solid foundation. Absolutely.
Comes back to what you were saying before about the risk to reward ratio of the exercises. And if you're obviously the whole point of powerlifting is we want to be lifting as much weight as we can. If you can do that with your toes up, heels down. I've not bench isn't my most
it's come on a long way.
It has come on. It has come on. I'm nearly on body weight now, so it's all right. I think there is, because as well, I think there is, every lift is quite technical, and I think sometimes bench can be sometimes overlooked on that, and just be like, right, let's lie down, let's do whatever, and we're just going to press it up. Whereas I think there is a lot more technique to it. So hopefully that cleared up whoever sent that question in. The next one, which was a late arrival, a late runner, training with scoliosis.
Yeah, so this is a question from one of my lefters who's going through a bit of scoliosis, who's just asking my advice for it, basically. And I just wondered whether my advice lined up with what everybody else is saying. Okay. So what I said, essentially, is that train relatively similar, educate yourself on the condition, but just bear in mind that when we're training, we've got a tolerance, a low tolerance, everything like that, in terms of volume intensity. You might refer to it as like maximum upper volume and stuff like that. Is that that's got to take into account not just your muscles, but your soft tissues, your joints, and stuff like that. Scoliosis, that the impact from the scoliosis might bring the max recoverable volume down a lot lower. So that might be the ceiling.
Yeah.
So you've always got to work to that ceiling.
I think when you're working with people with a specific condition like that, it's very important to go to the people that they've worked with in the past, like any physios and doctors, anything like that, to see how they respond to it, because there's a chance that they're going to be absolutely fine. Like, no one's going to have like the perfect spinal position, so it's just about doing your homework and seeing how they respond to things as normal, and then go from there.
That'd be my take on it, really. Just assess the severity of it. You know, if they've got scans and previous records, they know how bad it is and what they should or shouldn't be doing. You know, if they've actually been told not to do it, then it might be a case to refer it out again and see if that's going to be a possibility, or it might even be bad enough that they need surgery or something first before they can do that.
Yeah.
But if it's something they can live with day to day, I agree. Just be sensible with what you're doing. If you are finding that a certain rep range or a certain loading range is causing problems, and it's causing them to load slightly unevenly, or it's causing an issue somewhere else, then you keep it within that range just to make sure they can still progress, but it's not causing them any further problems.
I think it's something that applies to all special populations, really. You've got to find what's appropriate.
And there's something that I call the symmetry fallacy, like basically the assumption that as long as everything's symmetrical, then things are going to work perfectly well. Whereas, a lot of the best athletes in the world have a lot of asymmetries. You're going to have a different knee joint left to right, a different hip joint left to right as well. No two spines are going to be the same, and it's going to change like how you program things. But it might result in actually a stronger spine.
I think as for coaches listening, if you like, or if you're a lifter working with a coach, it's okay to be like, I've said it a couple of times, that's what the whole point why I set up this podcast is for asking people for questions that I didn't know. And if there is something, if you haven't got an injury there, and sometimes you're working with a coach, or as a coach you're not 100% confident, just be honest and be like, look, I think I'd rather refer you to a physio so we have a better idea of what's going on, just so that when it comes to writing a program, you've got enough information to work off, rather than, because ultimately you don't want to injure your lifter.
I think when in doubt, refer out. It's very easy for a personal trainer to go beyond his remit.
Yeah, I was just going to say work within your means. I think that's the main thing. And if it is beyond your scope, and every now and again there'll be something that comes up, and you could go away, do a little bit of reading on it, and then you could probably apply it, and it'll be okay. But when you're talking about something quite serious that could potentially impact somebody's health, you're probably out your depth. So it is completely okay at that point to refer out and get somebody else involved.
Even you have to turn on a client I had. A previous client with a heart condition that she didn't disclose to me until she hit crisis point again at some point, and then disclosed it. And I said, well, your doctor's told you to stop exercising, so stop exercising.
And I think it also speaks to the importance of having a team around you as well. So I have a particular physio that I can refer people to. I have a doctor that I can refer people to as well, and having this whole network of people definitely improves your service as a personal trainer. So rather than saying, right, you just go find yourself someone to go and work with, you can actually refer someone to someone that you trust. And I think that can sometimes make you more respected in their eyes, because you've said that you're not going to work with them, but you are sending them in the right direction, so they can ultimately end up working with you if the time becomes appropriate.
I think the last thing I'd add to it as well is the person in question, like kind of how much effort they're willing to put into it and whether they want to do it. Coming from someone who's had several surgeries and injuries and has always some kind of pain, it kind of comes down to the point of like how much you actually want to do it at times. Like if it's not actually physically going to harm them, but they're in a little bit of discomfort, and if they want to get stronger, they're going to have to just go through that, then that's up to them at that point, and they need to decide.
It's establishing at what point it is okay to push through pain. For me, I go on the other. I don't like to push people through pain. I can push through pain, and my knees are broken. But like with other people, as a coach, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'd rather send them to someone else that was comfortable with that, or get them physio until they do it, or scale it back, or maybe just say, look, we're not a professional athlete, let's just do some pull-throughs instead of deadlift.
If it becomes like not practical anymore, then don't do it.
Again, it comes back to that risk and reward thing. So for Dan pushing through injury, that's going to have all the reward in the world, like breaking records and
I never actively encourage any of my clients to do anything that I've done. But
we make the mistakes, so they don't have to.
That's where the experience comes in, and that's where you can help them. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
I think that's quite, what I've taken from that is obviously, as coaches, we're there to help you guys get stronger, stay injury free, and keep progressing. And hopefully, from listening to everything that we've chatted about today, I know live has gone off and I messed up recording at the start, but hopefully, we made those mistakes. So if you ever set up a podcast, the whole point of this was obviously with all of our backgrounds and as powerlifting enthusiasts competing as coaches, that hopefully people wanting to get involved in powerlifting or are currently involved in powerlifting but are struggling a little bit. There's some of the questions that we've spoken, or topics that we've spoken about there, that's ultimately helped you guys out, which was the whole point of it. And as coaches, we're not here to be like, right, you've got to do this, this, and this. Like, our word is gospel. As we've all chatted there, it is a process of helping you along. So I've really enjoyed chatting to you all. Like I say, I've been looking forward to this since we set it up. For everyone listening who either has some more questions about all the topics that we've covered about, or if people have done exactly what we've said about going on Google, getting some powerlifting programs, and they're actually thinking, do you know what, actually, I've completely bought into what they're saying, and I want to get involved in coaching with you, or I'll come and find you guys. Where can people find you? Let's go for
okay,
I'll go
first. Yeah. Okay, so you can find me on Instagram under the Heavy Metal Strength Coach, or the website gainsglitter.co.uk, or you can just find me on Facebook under Chris Kershaw.
Yeah, likewise, Instagram, you can find me at Strength Coach Bedford. It's my Instagram profile, post everything client related on there, realistically. You can also find me through my Facebook page as well, which is under the same name, and that's pretty much how I put myself out.
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram at TimGraphPowerlifting and at www.graphtrainingprinciples.com.
And because Steve's an absolute professional, all those links are going to be in the show notes as well.
They certainly will. I'm getting good at this editing.
As well as everything else that we mentioned.
Yeah. I just can't remember to press record.
Sometimes you need 80 chances.
Especially sort of in our local area, if you like, anyone that's wanting to got any questions about powerlifting or want to get stronger, 100%. Look at the work that these guys are doing. Like I say, these guys take quite a lot of people to competitions, and have been at the majority of the competitions that I've been competing at. And like I say, any questions, drop me a message, drop these other guys a message. Ultimately, our goal is to help you all get stronger and make sure that you're lifting consistently and injury free. So thanks a lot to everyone either listening live on Instagram. The episode will be posted in a couple of weeks. If you're already listening to it now on iTunes, this was in the past. This was ages ago. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to Chris, Dan, and Tim for taking the time to speak to me. Thanks everyone for listening, and I will see you all next week.
Awesome. Thanks for saying
Thank
that.
you. That's awesome.